Welcome to our third workshop of the semester. Thank you all for joining. Today we're going to be talking about how to evaluate an argument and how to develop a position after you've evaluated that argument or several arguments. So this is going to be really useful for your upcoming compare and contrast essay that's on AI intelligence, because that assignment asks you to assess different arguments on the topic and then to decide which point of view you agree with, and to explain why you feel that way. So first, we are going to break down the different parts of an argument and define it. So that way you're going to know exactly how you're meant to define it and how to define your own stance, right? Okay. So the first thing, let's define what an argument is when it comes to academic writing. An argument is actually structured in a very specific way when it comes to writing. It uses a series of statements to convince a reader that the certain facts, conditions, or position are true. Conclusion is what the argument is actually trying to demonstrate, right? Based on the supports that you're providing or the writer's providing with those premises. So you can think of premises kind of as the statements that provide the foundation or the evidence for the argument. This list right here is, they're clues that are going to tell you that maybe that's an argument premise. Another way to think about these words are that they're basically a synonym for because, right? They're saying the argument is true because, and then if you see these words show up in something you're reading, that's going to tell you that's one of the premises. And then similar for the conclusion element of an argument. So you might think of a conclusion as a synonym for therefore. So for example, pizza can be shared among many people. Therefore, pizza is the best food for a party. So the therefore tells us that the main claim of this argument is that pizza is the best food for a party, right? So is that clear? All right. So this is a model that really kind of helps you visualize kind of the structure of an argument. So the main argument here, public libraries should be funded in every community because they provide learning resources for all ages, and they provide a safe space for people to read, study, and gather. Okay, so then we know that's the actual argument. The premise one here is that they provide learning resources for all ages. Premise two is that libraries provide safe spaces for people to read, study, and gather. And the conclusion or the main claim is public libraries should be funded in every community. So is that structure clear? Does anyone have any questions about that so far? Okay. Great. So now that you're able to identify kind of the parts of the argument, now you can actually dive into how you assess the quality of an argument, right? So this is where the evaluating of an argument comes into play, because not all arguments are going to be created equally. You're going to want to consider the many elements of the writer's argument, like whether the evidence is clearly presented or whether it's valid evidence that they're presenting. You also want to think about the motivations and potential biases of the writer. So these are some useful considerations to think about when you're considering the quality of an argument, right? So is it clear? Is it directly linked to the conclusion? Can you verify that the evidence is solid? And is it logical? Does it make sense? And can you confirm that there's consistency among statements? So are all the aspects of the issue covered, right? You want to make sure not only that it makes sense, but also that they're covering every element of a potential argument. And then you also want to think about those assumptions, biases, and the counter arguments that might come into play for an argument. So for example, you want to think about where's that writer, where's his biases rooted in? You know, is he associated with certain organizations or things where he might have a motivation to feel a certain way on argument? So you want to consider all these things before you decide whether you agree with the argument or whether you think it's a valid argument. All right. So that's definitely a lot to take into consideration, right? Maybe if you were to put it into question form, it might help you kind of do a deeper dive into your assessment and to kind of walk through each of these questions to really decide the strength of an argument. So if you're going to ask yourself these questions, make sure you write everything down, by the way, because that's going to be very useful when you actually come to writing your essay. You're going to want to be able to reference these and possibly use them in your essay. So question 1, we already talked about a little bit, but ask yourself, does a writer assume that you will come to the text with certain knowledge? Are you going to share those views or their values? Where is the writer coming from and where are you coming from? Does the writer have an agenda, right? Is there a political slant? Is there influence in their interpretation of the evidence, right? You can read evidence and come up with different conclusions based on your own biases. So those are things to consider. And then how does the author use language? You know, in here they talk about how there might be specific words that you find intriguing, effective, ineffective, or possibly kind of bizarre or strange points they're pointing out. And are there strange or types of rhetorical moves that are being made that maybe you don't find effective? Maybe they're being, you know, a bully in their argument, or maybe they're using, you know, a lot of emotion to try and prove an argument that maybe they should be proving with logic instead. So those are things to think about. And then you'll, of course, want to think about the evidence, right? That's a very important element of argument. Is it credible? Is it trustworthy? Is it even relevant to what the author is presenting? And does it make sense, right? So things to consider. And then, of course, probably the most important question you're going to want to ask, how convincing is their overall? Do they accomplish what they wanted to? And depending on your assignment, this answer to this question might actually be your thesis, right? So this is kind of the whole approach, or the point of evaluating an argument is figuring out whether or not they've convinced you. So we will move on now to applying this to your upcoming compare and contrast essay, right? Let's see here. Okay. So let's think about what the prompt is asking for this assignment, right? Basically, it's asking which article makes a better argument, right? You're supposed to read those two articles, excuse me. And then you're supposed to be answering, how could artificial intelligence be ethically and effectively used in college classes? So there's a couple elements here that you need to think about when you're writing this essay. And you need to remember that the compare and contrast essay must have a debatable main point, right? So in your case, the debatable main point is to state which article made the better argument, and your opinion on how artificial intelligence can be ethically and effectively used in college classes. What you don't want to do is make it so that it's just laying out the similarities and differences of those two articles. That's not the main point of this essay. So, for example, you don't want, like, an unacceptable statement would be Smith's and Ford's arguments about public transit are similar, but also different, right? Because of course, two people's arguments are similar, but different. How could they not be? What is most important is who is more right. Which things is better? Is one idea or one thing better or more right than the other? How and why? So that's how you want to answer that. Not just saying Smith said this, Ford said this. Smith likes this, Ford likes this, okay? But a statement like Smith is right that expanding train lines for our city is the better option than Ford's suggestion to tax cars and gas less to make driving more affordable. So this is a better statement here because it's making a statement about which argument is more right, which is debatable and requires proof. Okay, so do you see the difference between those two statements and how it captures how you want to approach the essay? Yeah, just want to reiterate that because it's very easy to fall into that trap with compare and contrast essays of just laying out the differences and similarities. And as we just stated, that's really not the goal of this essay. Okay. All right. So then let's talk about how you might structure the actual essay. So you'll want to present each major opinion and its reasons and respond to both. So this means you're going to be addressing one article's argument and its reasoning, and then respond to that on its own. After that, you're going to respond to the first article, present the viewpoint, reasoning from, the second article. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to present the article and its reasoning and respond to it. So it's going to look something like this, where you have your introduction, and then you have your summary and response to the sources first, the article, the first article. And then you're going to have your second round of summary and response to the second article. Okay. And then your conclusion. All right. And so once you've done that, you're also going to be, while you're doing that, you're going to be addressing which point of view seems more accurate to you, right? Should AI and AI chatbots be used in college classrooms, and why? And you're going to be using the references from the assigned articles as well as your own experience to compare and contrast their views, possible uses or restrictions of AI in college classes. Right, so there's quite a few elements there to think about when you're putting together this essay. So that's why it's going to be most helpful to write down everything as you're going along, as you're breaking down and evaluating each of the arguments, as you're taking your own stance, and then as you're using what you've broken down in each of those arguments to support whatever your stance is.